Hello everyone and welcome back to another video. In today's video we're going to be talking about Regen 2024, which is going to be the first major of the season for Europe. And I know a lot of European players were not happy about the representation they had last season, rightfully so, and this is an amazing way to kick it off. Just immediately get that major under your belt. For our top 60 teams, you're going to have Andres FN, Maze Beans, Mr. R, and Super Semi in 13th, Mezcal, Orion, Ryukai, and Lancelot in 9th, and 7th you got Luigi and MK Big Boss, 5th is Bloom Forever and Siski, 4th is Tarek, 3rd is Glutony, 2nd is Crep Soleil, and projected to win the entire thing is the main invader of the event in MK Leo. Prior to the top 16, the bracket is split up into two, so we're going to be looking at both of those chunks. And my knowledge on the European scene isn't quite as good as it is on the American or even the Japanese scene, so more of this video is going to be talking about character versus character rather than player versus player. But if I have the information, of course I am going to share it. And our first matchup is going to be Leo versus Elite Tweet, and I'm pretty sure Elite Tweet plays all of the Spacies, but most prevalently they are going to be playing Fox. And Joker Fox is one of my most favorite matchups in this game. They just beat the daylight out of each other, and Leo has so much experience in that matchup versus Light where I don't think it's going to be a problem, but there always is that conversation of the different playstyle could throw the opponent off, but it's going to have to be a pretty drastic difference in playstyle for Elite Tweet to take that one. Then you're going to have Andres FN versus Dribby or Dribby, not super sure you say that, but I think it's Dribby. I believe they are a Pichu player, and I think Pichu has a chance of making that upset over Terry. It's most likely going to be the Terry out of Andres FN, even though he does play all the FGC characters. That is the one that he's been favoriting recently. You have those edge cards on lock, which are obviously nice, but I think it's going to be really difficult because if Terry jabs you or down tilts you at like 60% unexaggerated as Pichu, you are just going to die. God forbid he gets Go Meter online. So in order for Drivey to win that one, he's going to have to play pretty much a perfect game, but that's, what Pichu has to do all the time, so I'm sure he's used to it at that point. And then for that top 8, or that top 16 qualifier rather, you are going to have Leo versus Andres FN, and we have had Leo kind of struggling versus FGC characters in the past. He lost to Titan and Genesis, he's dropped a couple sets of riddles before, but I think he's going to be fine in this matchup. Personally, I think Leo's been playing really well recently. Since the second half of the season started off, he's just been kind of killing it, even though he doesn't place the highest of Supernova. I think he was honestly playing quite well at that event, and I do think that Joker beats Terry as well as all of the other FGC characters, so Leo should be fine and move on to that top 16 winner side. Our next top seed is going to be Luigi, and his first opponent is likely going to be Longo. Now, I do think that Luigi is going to win this one simply because of his set versus Zomba at, I believe it was Valhalla, but don't quote me on that one. I thought he looked really impressive there. He was just very smart at taking his engagements versus Rob. He wasn't panicking off stage, just all around played that one pretty well. So because of that, I think he should be fine this time around. Then you're going to have Lancelot versus Solo, and I would be a liar if I said I knew who wins between Roy and Rosalina, but if I had to guess, I would be going with Roy there. And also, Lancelot has been so impressive recently. I think he's been one of the best players in Europe in 2024, and he's only getting better. And I also think he is going to make that big upset over Luigi. Now, before the Europeans in the comments get mad at me, I am very aware that Lancelot has a terrible record versus Luigi. I believe he's down 0-5 or 0-4, something like that. He's never even managed to take the guy to game 5, but the matchup is in his favor, and I'm talking specifically about Chrom. I think you should at least give Chrom a try in this matchup. Roy's a little bit tricky just because versus Luigi, you want to have that max spacing. Obviously, you can't do that all the time as Roy, but with Chrom, you have that option at your disposal. Luigi is a character that, yes, he can edgeguard, but he doesn't have the best moves to actually deal with Chrom's up B, unless Plunger has a super specific interaction with it that I'm just kind of unaware of. I think that is a decent matchup for Chrom that he should at least try out. It's super in Luigi's favor based off the history, but based off Lancelot's form and the characters he's playing, I think he's got a chance. Our next top seed is going to be Tarek, and his first opponent is likely going to be Owl BBS, and I'd be a liar if I said I knew the intricacies of the Greninja Banjo matchup, but if I had to guess, I would say that Greninja wins that one. I think Shuriken is just a better projectile in the neutral than Banjo's projectiles, as well as Greninja having that massive boon of just being significantly faster than Banjo, able to dance circles around that character. Now, Banjo players have been kind of farming recently, I'm not going to lie, so I don't want to count Owl BBS out of this one, but I do think that Tarek is going to win. Then you're going to have Baze Bean versus Susu, and I'm actually not sure if this is going to be the Steve Ditto. I'm not comfortable enough to say that one of these players prefers playing a secondary in that matchup, but it is presumably going to be the Steve Ditto, and to be honest with y'all, I don't think it really matters who wins it because I think Tarek is going to be beating both of these players. I think Greninja is really good in the Steve matchup to the point where I would even consider him winning, and he literally beat Akola at one of the pre-invitationals for Supernova, so it's safe to say that Tarek is pretty good at the matchup. And our final top seed for this chunk of the bracket is going to be Bloom Forever, and his first opponent is likely going to be Von Gola, who plays a combination of Snake Min, but Snake is obviously going to be the character that we care about in this situation. That is a very difficult matchup for Bayonetta, but I honestly wouldn't be that surprised if Bloom just ends up going a different character. He does that a lot in the winner's side, so it would make sense for him to do it in one of his worst matchups. He might even do the Snake Ditto. I honestly wouldn't be that surprised, but even if he does go Bayonetta, I would still be betting on Bloom in this one. I just have a lot of faith in this player, but Von Gola is no joke by any means. You definitely have to be ready for him if you are Bloom, but I'm assuming he's done his homework. Then you're going to have Ryukai versus Space, and Aegis versus Fox is one of my favorite matchups in this game because you essentially have Fox versus Fox with a sword, and they're both terrible off stage. Obviously, they're both terrible off stage, but Aegis' recovery is so bad that it's very easy for Fox to actually gimp her. All he really needs is a shine off stage. I'd actually say it's easier for Fox to get the gimp on Aegis than it is the other way around. Now, I'm not super confident who is going to win this matchup. They've only played twice before, and it was a really, really long time ago, but Ryukai does end up winning both those sets, so I am going to say that he should win this one, and then you're going to have Bloom Forever versus Ryukai, and I'm, once again, just going to be going with Bloom to win this one because I just think he's the better player in this situation. I think Fox Bayo is really hard to win for Fox if the Bayo player plays it correctly, just kind of playing outside of that Fox burst range, not camping too hard so Fox gets a ton of value out of laser, but also not letting Fox get up close and personal. Whenever he hits your shield, you press that up B button. Whenever he dash attacks, you press that side B button. Just playing patiently, playing calm. I think Bloom's going to be able to pull it off. I should add before people in the comments get mad at me, I do think that Fox beats Bayonetta, but it's not unwinnable for Bayo. If you play it smart, you can't still win. That was the point I was trying to make. Our first top seed in the other part of the bracket is going to be Krebs-Saleh. His first opponent is likely going to be Vidad. Now, it's not going to be the Steve out of Krebs-Saleh in this matchup. At least I don't think it's going to be. I think Rob actually does really well into Steve to the point where I would consider that character winning that matchup. So it's likely going to be the Wario or Krebs-Saleh actually just forcing the Ditto versus Vidad. And honestly, I think both of those options he would come out on top. I was really impressed by Krebs-Saleh's play at Supernova. I already know he was good, but that just absolutely cemented it for me. So I'm going to have him winning that one. Then you're going to have Mr. R versus Nader U, and I do think that Nader U should make that upset right there. Sheik Pichu is just really difficult for Sheik. It's super hard to hit those long, precise combos on a character as small as Pichu, and also he just blows you up. Sheik is one of the lighter characters in this game, so that really early weight of Pichu isn't as big an issue anymore because Sheik is also facing that exact same problem. Obviously not to the same extent, but it is still an issue, so I think Nader U's going to pull off that upset there, and for Krebs-Saleh Nader U, I am very confident that Krebs-Saleh is going to win this one. In the recent encounters, Nader U isn't even going Pichu because the matchup is that bad. He needs a different tool versus Krebs-Saleh in order to find success, and unless his pocket, like, I don't know, Palutena or Charizard comes out and goes crazy, I think Krebs should be able to take that. Our next top seed is going to be MK Big Boss, and his first opponent is likely going to be Jaka, and I would definitely favor Big Boss here. It's Isabel versus Rob. At the end of the day, it's a very tough matchup for the little dog, but she does have one win condition, which is going to be getting control over Gyro. She actually does an amazing job at getting control over Gyro because of Pocket, but it's just a thing where, okay, once you get control of Gyro, you need to be doing like the crazy Rob Gyro combos where you're stringing that thing into itself for like 40-50%, ending it off with maybe a 4-air or something like that. You're going to need to find a lot of value out of the thing to overcompensate everything else about that matchup that is just genuinely terrible. So I think MK Big Boss should win that one unless Jaka goes absolutely crazy, train room combos all over him. Then you're going to have Orion versus Kerbo, and I think Orion definitely should be favored here, but it's always scary playing a Kirby player when you are on those faces just because the edge guarding potential is definitely there, and I've been getting a little bit on the Kirby train recently, I'm not gonna lie. It's probably because Gilhue just did so well at Smash Factor beating Austin Miller. I've seen the things that this character can do, but Orion just needs to be careful. That's all I'm gonna say. Then you're gonna have an MK Big Boss versus Orion, and I do think that MK Big Boss should win this one. I honestly don't have a ton of analysis to give. I don't think Wolf Rob is super swingy into either character's favor. I just think MK Big Boss has been doing pretty well recently, and it seems like whenever he goes to Europe, he gets that invader buff. Our next top seed is going to be Glutini, and his first opponent is likely going to be Kendrick Olimar. As always, when we see the tag, you gotta give it a shout out. It's fire. What can I say? But I do think that Glutini should win this one. I do think that Young Link slightly beats Wario if I had to favor one of the characters, but I just think Glutini's expertise is going to come in this matchup. And he's also got a really good record versus Super Semi, who I do believe is the best Young Link player in Europe, so he should be fine this time around. Speaking of Super Semi, he's literally right next to Glutini in that part of the bracket right there. His first opponent is likely going to be Niraz, and I think Niraz is actually going to make the upset right there. Pikachu is able to get in versus Young Link with the T-Jolt, and his projectile game isn't as effective on Pika because you're shooting arrows straight at me, but most of the time Pika is like up here coming in at a like 45-degree angle, so it's not really easy for Youngling to get the value out of his projectiles unless the Pikachu player just makes an error, and then once Pika gets his hands on you, you're pretty much just dead. Then you're going to have Glutony versus Neros, and I do think that Gluto is going to win this one. Straight up, this guy is just really good at the Pikachu matchup. I just think he's so impressive. He's very careful off stage, when to use the bike, when to use his resources to make it back safely. He's able to bait out quick attack, which is like incredible. Most people literally can't do that, but the amount of times I've seen Gluto somehow find someone quick attack and immediately punish it with an up air into waft is like only twice or 3 times, but I've also only seen quick attack punished like 5 times, so that's enough for me. And our final top seed part of the top 16 is going to be Siski, and his first opponent is likely going to be the Schmixtape, and I think it's most likely going to be the Wolf out of the Schmixtape in the situation. He could go Brawler, he could go Yoshi. I think Yoshi would be the worst choice out of the 3. Brawler is pretty much just like a worse Samus, and I actually think Wolf does pretty well into Samus, so if I were him, that's definitely the choice I would make. But to be honest with y'all, I think Siski is just going to be winning this one regardless based off the form that he's been in. But the Schmixtape is one of those players in Europe that I think is just on the cusp of making it into that top echelon of talent. He's right there, and all it would really take is a win over a player of Siski's caliber, so there's definitely possibility here, and if Schmixtape pulls that off, I wouldn't be surprised if he went on a crazy deep run. Then you're going to have Mezcal versus Pharaoh. They've never played before. I mean, Pharaoh isn't from Europe, so obviously they've never played before. It's Yoshi Ridley, which is definitely in Yoshi's favor, but I also don't know if Pharaoh's ever seen a Ridley player on the level of Mezcal. I'm still going to be giving this one to Pharaoh because, number 1, NA represent, baby, but number 2, the matchup is just so heavily in his favor that I think he should be able to handle it, but that Ridley is like really scary. Way scarier than it ever should be. And for Siski Pharaoh, as I literally just said for the Schmixtape, Yoshi versus Samus is a very difficult matchup for Yoshi, so I would expect Siski to take that one. And we have finally got to that top 16. Our first matchup is going to be MKLeo versus Lancelot or Luigi, depending on who you think is going to win. And considering that Luigi has a perfect record on Lancelot, I'm just going to be going with both of the options. So for Leo Luigi, I definitely think that Leo is going to win this one, considering that he just reversed 3-0'd Luigi at Supernova. Clearly a switch was turned on in Leo's brain from that BMing from Luigi. And to be honest, I don't think that switch will ever turn off. I think Leo, for the rest of his life, is just going to be like, whenever I see this guy in bracket, I'm going to be trying like it is the grand finals. And for Lancelot, I just expect Leo to win because he's really good versus sword characters. He even has a Roy of his own. He's going to be well versed in that matchup, and Joker's going to have no problem getting that edge guard on Chrom with down gun. So I think Leo should be fine and move on to that top 8 through the winner's side. Then you're going to have Tarek versus Bloom Forever, and you do have Bloom Forever winning their only 2024 encounter, but prior to that, Tarek had a very strong record on Bloom winning a majority of their encounters. And form-wise, I think Tarek has also just been much better recently. It's not really a knock on Bloom. It's more so just a compliment towards Tarek. He has been absolutely killing it in Europe, and I think he's going to top 8 this major winner's side. Next up is Crep Saleh versus MK Big Boss, and as I was talking about earlier with Vidad, I do think that Steve is off the table for Crep Saleh if he wants to win this one. Wario and Rob are going to be better choices, but I think if he tries to force the Ditto versus MK Big Boss, he is just going to end up losing that one. MK Big Boss's Rob is just too high level to try to checkmate him in his own matchup, but I think Wario is a very good choice. I didn't really touch about this when I was talking about the Vidad encounter, but I think Wario actually slightly beats Rob. That downer off stage is so lethal. It just lasts for so long, and obviously Rob isn't going to be coming up with that hitbox. Now, it's not like Rob has no solution to down air specifically. He can literally just up air it back, but there's just so many little things like that in the matchup where I would slightly favor Wario. I would slightly favor him in the combos. I would slightly favor him in the killing because of Waft, as well as the confirms being pretty easy to hit on Rob, in my opinion, just because of that big bar. There's just a lot of things that are going slightly into Wario's favor in that matchup where I would give it to Crep Saleh. Then you're going to have Glutzy versus Siski, and you do have Siski actually winning their last encounter, but it's still a very dominant one for Glutony overall, to the point where I'm just going to completely ignore that, say it was a flub, and say that Glutony should move on to the top 8 through the winner's side, but this is probably going to be a lot closer than it typically is. And y'all know the drill at this point. We don't lose out of the bracket just because the majority of these matchups are not going to happen. So I'm taking the players that are most likely to the top 8, and we have given them the percentages. You're going to have the confidence here with Leo, Tarek, Crep, Saleh, and Glutine. Fairly self-explanatory. Those are the guys that picked the top 8 through the winner's side. Then you're going to have someone confident with Bloom, Siski, MK, Big Boss, and Lancelot. And those are the people I picked the top 8 through the loser side of the bracket. And I've honestly been pretty boring here, going for 7 of the 8 top 8 picks. But, I mean, what can I say? I just agree with the seeders on this one. All these players in the initial spots that they're supposed to top 8 as well. And the only real difference is that I have Lancelot making that upset over Luigi, even though the record is terrible. But I also think this is the top 8 qualifier that has the most amount of variance, because if this is Super Semi or Neroz, I think they both have a chance of upsetting Mezcal, and I think both of those players also have a chance versus either Luigi or Lancelot. Really, any of the 5 possible players in this combination could make top 8, but the most likely one, in my opinion, is going to be Lancelot because it just has the least amount of bracket variance in that loser side, whether or not this is Neroz, whether or not this is Super Semi, depending on who wins that set, then they actually have to beat Mezcal, and it's just a whole ordeal of stuff. I'm just going to be going with Lancelot to win it because, number 1, his form's been crazy, number 2, I think his characters do pretty well against his most likely opponents, and number 3, he's crazy once again, really got to hammer that point home. Then you're going to have everyone else, Lugi, Andres Sefen, Ryukai, Mezcal, Super Semi, Mr. R, Orion, Mazebean, Space, Susu, and Nader. You as well as Pharaoh, got to get that anti-representation in there. And I think Europe as a region has like 6 or 7 players, maybe even more than that, that are really, really good at the super top level of Smash Ultimate, or at least close to it. And then after that, there is a clear gap, in my opinion, but there's like a ton of European players, like a ton, like 20 or 30 of them that are all kind of in contention for being that next European player to step up. I think Crep Soleil is the most recent example of that, just absolutely popping off. There's so much talent in Europe that is at a really high level right next to each other that picking just one of them to make top 8, specifically, again, through this part of the bracket right here, is so difficult. But I'm also fairly certain that the top 8 seeds are mainly going to go as projected because of that point that I just said. And we've gotten to the part that you all have been waiting for, that top 8. As always, this lovely graphic was made by Memorization. Their link will be down below. Be sure to check them out and sub while you're down there. But our first matchup in this top 8 is going to be MK Leo versus Tarek. And they've played 3 times before, every single one of those sets going into Leo's favor. But specifically, their set at UFA was really competitive, to the point where I think Tarek has a very real chance in this matchup. And based off Tarek's own matchup chart, he does have Greninja beating Joker. Now, I don't agree with him on that one, though. If he were to take someone's advice, I would probably take his. But you are going to be able to kind of mash on Greninja's shield as Joker, which is not a luxury that he usually has. But moves like Nair, back air, down air, they just become a lot safer because the character's out of shield game is a lot weaker. And obviously, as Greninja, your main kind of, not win condition, but your main advantage to the character is that you don't have to be in shield. You can just run around because of your superior mobility. But the thing about that is Joker has gun. He's going to be able to hit Greninja on those runaways. So, and even if it's not a lot of damage, it just slowly adds up over time. And I am going to be slightly giving Leo the dub on this one, but I think this should be a very competitive set, one that Tarek absolutely could take, especially off his recent form. Then you're going to have Crep Soleil versus Gluttony, and if you haven't been watching European tournaments, this might seem like a bit of a toss-up, and maybe you'd favor Gluto, but if you have, then you would heavily favor Crep Soleil in this one. It has gotten so bad to the point where Gluttony is going Snake versus Crep Soleil's Steve, because Wario Snake is a miserable matchup. Snake Steve rather, not that bad of a matchup, but when the best Wario player in the world is being forced off by his Wario prodigy, I mean, that is just a good sign for Crep Soleil. I've never seen Gluttony play anyone other than Wario, and I've never seen him win a game on anyone other than Wario, so it's probably not going to change this time around. Next up is Lancelot versus Bloom Forever. They've played twice before, with Bloom winning their most recent encounter, and I think it's a pretty difficult matchup for Bayonetta, that being Roy, obviously, because Chrom is not an option. We're not even going to talk about that one, but it's really hard for Roy to actually get those sweet spot hits versus Bayo because she's such a difficult character to track down. She's so hard to hit in that neutral, just constantly dancing around you, and then what's that you whiff? You're getting side beat, you're getting down tilted, up tilted, and then after that, it's literally just whatever the Bayonetta player wants. I do think that Bloom is going to be the victor of this one. Then you're going to have MK Big Boss versus Siski, and I've got the record right here. They have played a shocking amount of times considering that they are not from the same region, and as you can see, a lot of those sets have been going into MK Big Boss's favor, but it's also not like a wipe in his favor. Siski has been fighting back, but because he does have that more dominant head-to-head, I am going to be giving him this one, but this should be like a very, very close set. Definitely keep your eye on that one because it's going to be a banger. Next up is going to be Gluttony versus Bloom Forever, and Bloom Forever, I think, was the first player in Europe to truly challenge Gluttony as the best player of the region. Obviously, Siski was very good as well, but it was never to the point where he was able to consistently beat Gluttony, but Bloom had one of the best records on Gluttony that anyone had in the entire world, but the more they play, Gluttony slowly started to figure out. I feel like the first time you play Gluttony, it's like a cakewalk. It's super easy, super free, relative, of course, but the second, third, fourth time you play, you're on MasterChef, all of a sudden, he just ramps it up in difficulty because his adaptation is unbelievable. unbelievable. He has the best adaptation in the world. At least he probably has the best adaptation in the world. So I am going to be giving him the dub here. And also it should be considered that he has won their only encounter in 2024. So just icing on the cake. I don't know why the cake analogy was so important for me with Gluttony there. Then you're going to have Tarek versus MK Big Boss. And I do think that Tarek is going to win this one. I was talking about earlier on with that Leo set that it's a big problem for Greninja that you really can't punish people mashing on your shield. But it's not like anyone can punish Max Face Rob Nair anyway. And Greninja's mobility is such a big boon in that matchup. The combos are super easy as well. Edge guarding, I think, is something that Greninja is actually pretty decent at. You can go out there with that back air, and without that hitbox from Rob, it can be difficult to contest. And you can also send Rob in the direction that you kind of want, pump him up into the air with Hydro Pump. And we've seen Tarek do these things before. I think he is quite good in this matchup, and he should be winning it. So we've got our top four, Leo Crepsoleil on that winner's side, and Gluttony Tarek in the loser's side. And for Leo Crepsoleil, I'm pretty confident it's going to be Steve in this matchup for Crepsoleil. I just think that's the best character choice going into Leo, considering that he has so much experience versus Wario, and he also just dumpstered Zomba in their last two encounters. And I also don't think Leo is very good versus Steve. Now, we haven't seen him play against a super top-level Steve player in a little bit at this point. I'm sure he's been refining himself in that matchup. I think Joker's pretty decent in that matchup. Not to the point where I would say he's winning, but I could see it being considered even. But until I see Leo overcome that Steve matchup, I am going to be going with Crepsoleil to win this one. Then you're going to have Gluttony Tarek in the loser side, and this is a really tough one for Tarek. I don't know their exact record, but Gluttony is like 5-0, 6-0, 7-0 on Tarek. He has never dropped a set to him. Very dominant in his favor. But there is a first time for everything. I think Lancelot's going to get his first win on Luigi, and I think Tarek is going to finally get that win over Gluttony. I've said it a lot in this video, but I was just so impressed by he beat Akola. That's all I have to say. He beat Akola at the pre-invitation for Supernova. He can literally beat anyone in the world. I do think that Greninja Wario is a very difficult matchup for Greninja. That down or off stage is an absolute nightmare, but I'm sure Tarek has been working on it incredibly hard. They've yet to play in 2024, and Tarek's been on top of the world recently. In that losers finals, you're going to get that MK Leo Tarek run back. And it's the exact same points that I made in the winner's side. I do slightly favor Joker in that matchup. You get to hit Greninja Shield. You have Gun. You also have Arsene, which is something that I didn't talk about. I would favor Joker in the edge guarding, unless there's like some crazy shenanigans that you can get with Hydro Pump, maybe specifically versus that Arsene recovery. And if there's any Greninja players or Joker players for that matter in the comments that do know the intricacies of the matchup, please tell me, because I don't know out here. There's too many matchups in this game to keep track of. But even if you do have this as a winning matchup for Greninja, it wouldn't be by a very wide margin, and we've seen MK Leo overcome deficits many times before. I think he'll do it in winners, and I also think that he's going to do it in losers. So that means for our grand finals, we get that run back of Crepsoleil versus MK Leo, and once again, it is the exact same logic. I think the Crepsoleil Steve is going to get him his first major win. And with that, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed. The support has been absolutely unreal as of late. If there's anything I left out, got wrong, or if you just want to say hi, leave a comment down below, sub while you're down there, and I will see you all in the next one. Bye-bye.